if you commit to the long haul and doing good work for your audience and letting them go on the journey with you, they will be your biggest fans and they will stick it out with you and they will share the word and you will get there. Welcome to this video on our show host series. I'm Christine Baird. I'm the owner of Worthful Media. I'm a podcast and YouTube producer for personal brands. And I wanted to do a video that's fun and inspiring. We do a lot of strategic videos on this series and a lot of like real talk and tips, but sometimes you need a dose of inspiration about what's working well for other people in your space. And so let's talk about it. I'm going to share some of my favorite shows in the personal brand space on YouTube and podcasting and what I think they're doing really well and things I think anyone can learn from them. If you hear construction noise, it's because they are building a brand new building next door. And I didn't want to wait for them to finish because they're doing hard work out there. Plus it might rain and I don't want them to have to pause. So it's not going to be perfect audio today, but I feel fine about that because it's just you and me, Okay. One of my very favorite examples of an awesome personal brand podcast and YouTube show is Gabby Bernstein. And this launched about 2 years ago. Gabby launched the Dear Gabby show. And it was primarily a podcast and she filmed it as well for Instagram and puts clips on YouTube. Gabby is a super well-known spiritual teacher, meditation teacher, and best-selling author, and like just very established. So first off, no comparison about stats or reach or anything like that. What I want you to remember about Gabby's show is that she did something I hadn't seen anyone else do yet in this space. And if they had, I just wasn't aware, but it was so brilliant. And it's if you have time on your side. So if you have time, you can do something real genius like she did. And what she did was, this was during the pandemic. She was obviously home and she had a new baby and she spent an entire year doing Instagram lives every week where she would answer questions from her audience. She has a huge audience. She's a well-known coach. She was playing to her strengths here. And she recorded all of those Instagram lives. And she didn't just record them on Instagram. Instagram's pretty crappy with video and audio. Even though she was Instagram living, and that's how people were asking questions and interacting with her, she was also recording on a really good mic and a great camera and a setup in her home. And she was creating a year's worth of podcast episodes before she launched her show. Now that is a master move. And like I said, it works if you have time. But she realized she was going to launch a show. She realized she had all of this bandwidth and attention because everyone was home. It was like 2021, I think, maybe 2020. She knew she had attention and she had time and she could record these fabulous episodes where she was live coaching people, on Instagram and bank a year's worth of episodes before she launched her show. And then she launched her show a year later with Dear Media is her network. And it was like, topping the charts from day one because she's a very established persona and had done a great job getting so far ahead and had all this great video and audio to launch her show with. And I remember seeing that. I think it launched in 2022 or maybe the end of 2021. And I was just thrilled because it was such a boss move and it was a rare set of circumstances, right? Like not everyone has that much time and that much runway, but she could. And so she did. And she thought ahead, like what resources did I have available? She's a master at creating content. She had cameras and mics at home. Her husband was there. I'm sure he was the one filming. She was able to use what she had during this lockdown time and create a year's worth of content. And by the time she launched her show, not only did she have all those episodes already recorded, she had been creating demand for her show for a solid year, like a year of Instagram lives, coaching and answering people's questions and getting them in the habit of hearing her drop in weekly to do long form sessions with her. Like it was just so awesome. So that's one of my favorite examples to share from the personal brand space because it is thoughtfully using what resources you have and playing to your strengths. And that is sometimes overlooked. It's easy to think like, I need to have a bunch of fancy gear and people, and I need to do this in 2 months and get it going. And maybe, but you could also do it at home with like a year's worth of runway and then send it off to editors and sign with a network and do all that cool stuff. So that's inspirational story number one. Gabby Bernstein, we're linking her show in the comments of the video if you are interested in checking her out. Second example that I love, that I reference often, is one of my favorite podcasts. It's an audio only show. I've listened to it for years, and it's hosted by Rob Bell. It's called The Brobcast. And he is a super well-known author, speaker. He had a past as a megachurch pastor, and then he kind of left that and moved to California and has become like this really well-known spiritual guide, you could say. And so he also has a big audience, but not on social media. Like, he's never been a social media darling. He's just like put in decades of work becoming a very good writer and speaker. And, you know, people in the Christian community and beyond have followed him for a long time, even though he made a major transition, you know, and left like the church he was known for. And so what I love about the Robcast and Rob Bell is he does not edit his show. I'm serious. He pushes play, he records an episode, he pushes stop, and that's what goes out on the airwaves. He's never edited his show. He's never had music. He's never had an intro. He's never run ads, like none of it. It's a totally independent show. It's not on a network. He probably spends $0. Maybe he spends $15 a month on like a hosting service. It's an audio only show, no presence on YouTube. And it is such a good show. And it's clearly from him. He's going on like, he's in episode 300 something at this point. It works so well for him. Again, he smartly plays to his strengths. He's an excellent speaker, decades of experience, and he's a good writer. And so he can write the outline of a show and just turn on the mic and go. And he doesn't need any of this fancy frills. It's playing to his strengths in a really smart way, and it's unedited. And sometimes he even does guest interviews, and those are unedited. And if the dog barks or a kid walks in or they lose their train of thought and need to come back, they just keep it all in. It works because he's such a seasoned speaker and writer, and he knows how to deliver a message. And so he doesn't mess with all that stuff. Like, I don't think he's ever had an editor or producer at all. Like, he doesn't need one. So I love that. I've listened to the Robcast for years. I've met Rob. Like, I think he's just awesome in many ways. But why I wanted to share that example with you is because it's totally legitimate to not edit your show. If you have the skills and kind of the language practice that you can speak, you don't have to be perfect. But if you've already really honed your ability to deliver, you don't need to spend a bunch of time and money on editing. You could if you wanted to, especially if you're doing video, you might want to add in some stuff. But even then, you don't have to. So that's example number 2 that I love from the personal brand space of show hosts just doing really smart, creative things that play to their strengths and kind of put them in a category of their own. Okay, example number 3. This is no surprise if you've followed me for a long time or our content, our podcast, our email list. But my all-time favorite podcaster is Rich Roll. And again, we've linked all these podcast shows in the notes of the video if you want to check them out. But he started his show in December of 2012. So like early days when podcasting was not a thing yet and very few people were doing it. And I started listening to that show in January of 2013. So like within a month of him launching it, which was total fate. Like I'd never listened to a podcast before. It's the first one I ever listened to. I truly think to this day, it was like meant to be. And what's been so cool for me is watching Rich Roll as a show host over the last 10 years. I think he just hit a 10-year anniversary on his show because I've listened to a lot of those episodes. Not every one. He's in episode 600 something, but I've listened to a lot of them. And I've kind of followed his journey as a show host and as a personal brand. He's in the health and wellness space between veganism and kind of, you know, mastering yourself in your life. Ultra endurance sports, things like that. And I just adore his show because it has evolved so much. He has evolved so much in the last 10 years. And he has kept doing his show through it all. And he's let his audience see his own evolution. He hasn't tried to go back and delete like the old original episodes or times when things were not perfect or he was having, a really challenging time. He just included it all. And it's all there for anyone to follow. And what I love about that as an example for you as a show host is that if you invite your audience to go on a journey with you that spans years, you are developing a level of trust and loyalty and community, like all these things we talk about that, are supposed to be the aspiration of every personal brand. Show hosts who stick it out and do good work through all these chapters of life through the years is exactly what they cultivate. And it is not glamorous all the time, and it does not pay the bills all the time, and it doesn't always feel like the needle is moving, but it is. And it is leading to something pretty fantastic if you pay attention to your audience, if you're in tune with what they're responding to, if you're willing to improve your skills, if you're thinking about a big picture and how you can turn this into something bigger. And so Rich is one of my favorite examples of all time. I still listen to his show. It's still fantastic. And I mean, he's evolved so much. He has a beautiful studio in California. He has multiple segments that run. He does a full YouTube show, a full podcast, like sponsored show, like everything you could ever want. He's achieved as a podcast host at this point. But it took him 10 years. And I just love that example because I have always held him as like a great example of someone in the podcast space who's doing good work, but also because he was willing to show the process along the way and let the audience come along and see the whole thing. And that has always made me like one of his biggest fans. So that's the takeaway from Rich Roll, is that if you commit to the long haul and doing good work for your audience and letting them go on the journey with you, they will be your biggest fans and they will stick it out with you and they will share the word and you will get there. It just is a different kind of commitment. So that's my third inspirational example for you today. I hope that these were a little bit of a boost to you. It can sometimes feel overwhelming, especially if you're starting out or you're in year 1 or you're in year 2 and you're like, how is this ever? There's so much going on and look at everyone else. This isn't a comparison thing. It never works to compare yourself. It's a matter of knowing you're not the only one out there doing it and that it does take time and dedication, and that if you stick it out and think about playing to your strengths and do your own thing well, it will magically pay off. It really will. And really cool opportunities will come and you can be creative. So that's the video for today. Check out these shows I mentioned in the video description if you're interested. If you have comments about anything we talked about, you want me to do more of these good example videos, I'm happy to do them. Be sure to subscribe to the channel because we're bringing you these videos weekly and I want you to get all the tips and all the inspiration. And I'll see you in our next video.